The Two Thieves. Long, long ago in Romania, there lived two thieves. One came from the country, and the other from the city. One day, while he was on his way to the country, and the other was on his way to the city, they met on a deserted road. After exchanging greetings, they inquired about the sort of work each other engaged in. Now, if you think that either of the men was surprised to learn of the other profession, you could not be more mistaken. Thievery, though by no means an honorable profession, nonetheless was practiced very extensively. Thus, the only concern of either of them was to determine how excellent a thief the other really was. Thus, one said to the other, "If you are really such a good thief as you claim to be, let me see you steal eggs from under that crow sitting up there on its nest." The thief agreed to the challenge, and swiftly and expertly he climbed up the tree. So deftly did he place his hand under the bird that the crow did not feel a thing. But what the thief did not realize that while he was stealing the eggs, the country thief was stealing his breeches. When he descended from the tree, he noticed what had happened. He said with a grin, "I see you're as every bit as good a thief as I am. Let's become blood brothers and practice our profession together." Since both were desperately in need of money, they decided to rob the king's treasury. They waited till the sun was setting, then nimbly climbed to the roof of the palace. After having looked through a number of skylights, they at last found the treasure chamber. Directly below them were barrels upon barrels filled with gold coins. Quickly they lowered a rope into the chamber, and while one thief descended into the room and filled a large bag with glistening coins, the other stood watch on the roof. Nobody saw them come in, and nobody saw them leave. But thus, within minutes, the thieves, their loot in hand, made their way to the nearest town. The next day, just before noon, as was his custom, the king went to his treasury to count his money. He counted and recounted, but no matter what technique he used, more than 2,000 coins were missing. Angrily, he turned to the guard who stood watch outside the treasure chamber. "Who has entered this room since I was here yesterday?" he snapped. "No one, my lord," replied the guard. "Impossible," said the king, and off he went to the prison, where an old thief was held captive. "Old thief," he said, "someone has broken into my treasure chamber and stolen more than 2,000 pieces of gold. However, the guard told me that no one has entered, and nowhere can I find a hole in the wall." The old thief thought for a while, then he said, "There must be a hole somewhere, great king, only you don't see it. Have a small fire built in the treasure chamber and watch where the smoke escapes. This will be the place where the thieves entered. When you have found the opening, come back here, and I will tell you what you must do." The king did as he was bid, and sure enough, great billows of black smoke escaped from an opening in the skylight. When he told the thief of the discovery, the old thief said, "Do not repair the window, great king, for certainly a thief will return, and that will be your opportunity to trap him. Have a cask of the heaviest molasses placed beneath the opening. When the thief descends, he will be stuck in the vat." While these preparations were being made to trap the thieves, the two scoundrels were sitting in a country inn feasting on a large leg of lamb and discussing their next move. "You know, friend," said one to the other, "there is a great fortune in that treasure chamber. If we move fast enough, we can take some more of the gold before the king realizes that anything's missing." Hence, that very same night, the two thieves were once again on the roof of the palace. The city thief quickly lowered the country thief into the chamber. Great was the surprise when, instead of landing on the floor of the chamber, he sank into a cask of molasses that gripped him so tightly there was no escape. "Brother," he whispered, "we've been fooled. I can move neither forwards nor backwards, nor can you pull me up. Make your escape, but before you leave, be so kind as to give me some poison so that I will not be alive when I fall into the king's hands." "Never fear, brother," replied the other. "You are not finished yet. I will give you the secret potion that will make you appear quite dead, but I shall be back for you tomorrow." Saying that, he lowered himself into the chamber and fed his friend a few drops of the potion. Instantly, the other's body stiffened, and he stopped breathing. Anyone who did not know the secret would have to assume that he was dead. When the king arose the next morning, he hurried to his treasure chamber. "Ha!" he shouted with glee when he saw the figure trapped in the glasses. "I've caught you, you scoundrel! Now you shall pay with your miserable crime." Great indeed was the king's disappointment when he realized that the thief was dead. Once again, he trudged back to the jail in order to consult the old thief. "Oh, king," he said, "you are dealing with a most cunning pair of thieves." "Thieves?" questioned the king. "You mean there is more than one?" "Indeed, indeed," came the reply. "These men are masters of their art." "But how do you know there's another one?" asked the king, greatly puzzled. "Because the thief could not have killed himself, nor could he have simply died by being stuck in the tub of molasses. But all this is not lost. Surely the one who has killed him will come back to steal his body. What you now must do is to place his body in a chair outside the city gates, and have your soldiers keep a careful watch." While the king was making these preparations, the thief was carefully making plans for rescuing his friend. First, he bought a white mare in a cart, and he purchased 4 jars, each one containing 20 measures of wine. These he placed in each cart. Then he disguised himself by putting on a wig of white hair and a false nose, and by dressing himself in the slovenly costume of a poor old man. As soon as it was twilight, he seated himself in the cart and drove straight to the palace. While he approached the gates, he was not surprised as his comrade seated in a chair, appearing quite dead, nor was he surprised to find many soldiers guarding the body. Indeed, he expected the king to set a trap. When he was within 50 paces of the guards, he pulled his hair and began to weep, and pretended that his cart had broken down, and that the jars had fallen out. He made such a fuss, screaming and shouting and imitating that his master would kill him if he didn't arrive at the destination by midnight. But the corporal in charge of the guards ordered his soldiers to help the poor old man. "If we help you, old man, to set the cart right and replace the jars, will you give us a drop to drink?" asked the corporal. "I'll do that gladly I will," wailed the thief. So the guards straightened the cart and replaced all but one of the heavy jugs of wine. This one the thief passed among them, as he had promised, and they drank and drank until they could drink no more. But the soldiers did not know that this was no ordinary wine. The clever thief had put a sleeping potion into the liquid, which was powerful enough to put even the strongest man to sleep within half an hour. When he noticed the soldiers were not only a little tipsy, but also drowsy, that they had to fight off sleep, he pointed to his friend and asked, "Tell me, Corporal, who is this?" "That," the corporal replied with a great yawn, "that is the thief." To this the old man replied in a frightened and serious voice, oh dear, I must leave here immediately, otherwise the thief will steal my mare." "Oh, what a silly old fellow you are," the guard replied, with his eyes half closed. "How can he get up to steal your mare? Can't you see that he's quite dead?" "He will steal my mare. I know that's what he'll do. You must never trust a thief." "Quiet, old man," said one of the soldiers. "He won't steal your mare, but if he does, we'll pay you for her." "He'll steal her. He's a thief," said the old man, frowning and shaking his head. "No, who has ever heard of a dead man stealing anything?" asked the corporal. "I'll tell you what we'll do, old man. We'll make a bet. We will pay you 3,000 groats for the mare if he steals her. If he doesn't, you must give us those 3 remaining jugs of wine." "All right," said the old man, and he sat down on the ground, resting his back against one of the wheels of his cart. Well, this time, the sleeping potion was having its maximum effect. One after the others, the soldiers fell to the ground in heavy sleep. Immediately, the thief got up and walked over to his friend. He took out a tiny flask and poured its contents into his mouth. Within minutes, he stirred and opened his eyes. "Listen, brother," said the city thief. "This game isn't over yet. We haven't much time because the drug I gave these men will wear off in a few minutes. Take the mare and ride her into town. Wait for me there. I will join you in the morning." As soon as he saw his friend right away, the city thief sat down on the ground where he had been before and pretended to be asleep. Within a few minutes, the soldiers woke, one by one, and looked about. To their great astonishment and horror, saw that both the mayor and the thief had disappeared. The corporal rubbed his eyes in utter disbelief and cried out, "The man was right!" And he walked over to the thief, who was still pretending to be asleep, and woke him up. "I don't know how it's possible, but things have happened exactly as you said they would. Both the thief and the mayor have disappeared. But what is really terrible is the king will have our hides for this. If you promise, old man, never to tell anyone what has happened here, we'll give you 500 goats instead of 300, we promise you." The thief agreed, and the guards gratefully thanked him for being so understanding. Having accomplished what he had set out to do, and also richer by some 500 groats, the thief wandered into town. The next morning, the king rushed to the gate to find out what happened. Puzzled and irritated by the blustering corporal's ridiculous explanation, the monarch set forth the fourth time to the cell of the old thief. "Didn't I tell you that these are the most extraordinary thieves?" said the old man. "But don't worry, we'll catch them yet. Go to town to the butcher and purchase nearly all of his meat. Then order him to charge 2 ducats for every pound of meat that is still for sale. Only a man who suddenly has come into a lot of money would not mind paying such an outrageous price. And you may be sure that clever thieves will make such a purchase within 3 days." The king thought this a clever plan. He went into town and purchased all the meat except for a few legs of lamb. The very next day, the thief went to the butcher. When he heard the extraordinary price of being asked for a leg of lamb, he knew at once again a trap had been set for him. "As much as I would like to do business with you," he said, "I cannot afford it." He stomped out of the shop, only to return a few minutes later. "My cart is broken down," he said. "I wonder if you would be kind enough to lend me an axe so that we can repair it." The butcher turned his back to fetch the axe. The thief quickly cut down the biggest leg of lamb and stuck it under his coat. Then he took the axe and pretended to repair the vehicle. He returned the instrument and profusely thanked the butcher for his help. The same evening, the king went to the butcher. "Well, butcher," he shouted, "King, did you have your customer?" "Your Majesty," cried the poor man, terribly afraid of the king's wrath, "I don't know how it happened or who did it, but one of the legs of lamb was stolen." The king was amused and annoyed at the same time. He began to enjoy playing the game of trapping the thieves. Thus, instead of condemning the butcher for his stupidity, he only nodded his head and whispered, "I'm not surprised. I'm not at all surprised." Then he returned to the prison to inform the old thief of how they'd been outsmarted again. The thief suggested a most unusual plan. "Make a proclamation, great king," he said, "and offer the thief all the money you possess as well as the sovereignty of your kingdom, if only he will come forward and say who he is." The king posted this proclamation outside of the palace gates. When the thief finished reading the declaration, he decided to present himself immediately to the king. "Your Majesty, I am the thief you wish to meet. I have come here to collect my reward." "Indeed," replied the king, "but how can I be sure it is really you?" "I shall prove it to you," answered the thief. He pointed to a peasant who was slowly leading an ox up the road. "I shall steal the animal from that peasant." The thief left the king and ambled over to the peasant, who, of course, was none other than his companion, the second thief. From a distance, the king watched in amazement as he saw the peasant first gesticulate wildly with his hands, then run off in a great panic. Soon the thief was before the king with the animal at hand. "How did you manage that?" asked the king, with a twinkle in his eye. "I have my ways, your majesty," replied the thief. "It is really very simple. But isn't it time for my reward?" "There's one more task you must perform," said the king. "If you succeed in this, you shall not only become king, but also my daughter shall become your queen." "And what might that be?" replied the thief. "You must steal the priest out of the church." The king's face lit up with a huge grin, for he thought this task was too difficult for even the clever thief as this one. But the thief thought this difficult chore. He certainly gave no signs of being worried. He immediately took leave of the king and headed towards town. Then he bought several hundred crabs and several hundred candles. At the church, he tied a candle to each crab's claws. Then, one by one, he freed the crabs and lit the candles. Slowly, the strange procession crawled towards the altar. Because it was very dark within the church, the priest could not see the crabs, but only the hundreds of lit candles that were slowly moving towards him. While the priest was trying to find the meaning of this, the thief called out in a booming, reckoning voice, "Come, priest, for God calls thee by his messengers to himself. Follow the procession." Thus the thief, followed by his crabs, who in turn were followed by the priest, arrived at the palace. When the king saw the strange parade slowly wending its way towards the throne room, he burst out in a great boisterous roar of laughter. The priest, visibly upset by the crude joke that had been played on him, hung his head. But the king would not permit any sadness. He explained to the priest what had happened, and then the priest, too, joined in great merriment. The next day, the thief and the king's daughter were wed. The thief became king, and his reign was renowned for wisdom and humor with which he exercised his power.